Okay, you can start now. Sorry, I wanted to make sure it was recording.
Good idea. Okay.
And my screen is coming up saying my link is unstable. Thank you, Belle, once again. So I am going to just stop the video to reduce the flow through for me.
Okay, so then as we begin, let's, Aaron, I guess everybody should mute themselves when they're not talking. I'll do the introductions. Then we'll talk about who is our author, and then we'll talk about our thanks and open mic and all that stuff, okay? So we have Word Up. Acknowledge that some of us are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe and Huron-Wendat people. Word Up is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture, and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So tonight we have Barbara Kyle, who I'm really interested in getting to know. She's the author of the acclaimed Thornley Saga, a 7-book series of historical novels set in the 16th century England. Riveting Tudor drama, USA Today says. And of contemporary thrillers, including Beyond Recall, which was a Literary Guild selection. Her latest novel is The Man from Spirit Creek, a stunning thriller from Goodreads. Over 500,000 copies of her books have been sold in 7 countries. Barbara has taught at U of T. Her book, Page Turner, has inspired writers around the world. Her video course, Your Path to Writing a Page Turner is, Your Path to Writing a Page Turner is a Udemy bestseller. Do we have that Udemy link? We should make sure we share that on our site, and we'll make sure we share it on Facebook as well.
Right, yeah.
Barbara has helped launch many writers to publishing success, including best-selling mystery author Robert Rottenberg, award-winning historical novelist Krista Bezos, and Bruce Gardner, and our own sci-fi author Colleen Winter. Before becoming an author, Barbara enjoyed a 20-year acting career on television, film, and stage productions in Canada and the US. So everybody, here we have Barbara Kyle.
Hello. Oh, now I've lost you all suddenly. How do you like that?
We were,
see if I can get this.
we were muted. Hello.
I can hear you.
There. That should do it.
I'm going to mute myself now, though. If I can.
Ah, I see. Now I'm spotlighted.
Yeah, you have center stage now.
Oh, I see. Okay, good.
So when the kids run through in the back screaming, you won't hear them. We're muting.
Oh, everybody else is muted. Good. Okay. Well, I understand that the format is for me to do a reading from The Man from Spirit Creek, which I'm happy to do. But I thought first what I would do is just read the blurb that's on the book itself, because I think it's a rather good blurb. So I'll read that first, and then I will read 2 separate selections. One a very short one that's near the beginning of the book, and one that's quite a bit longer, probably about 4 minutes or so. That's about 4 chapters later. So that's what I'll read. So here's the blurb. When Liv Gardner arrives in the rural town of Spirit Creek, Alberta, she has nothing but her old car and a temporary job as a paralegal with a local attorney. But Liv's down-market persona is a ruse. She's actually in-house counsel of Falcon Energy, a small oil and gas company she co-owns with her fiance, CEO Mickey Havelock, and they are facing financial ruin. Farmer Tom Wainwright, convinced that lethal sour gas killed his wife, is sabotaging Falcon's rigs. But Wainwright is clever at hiding his tracks, and the police have no evidence to charge him. With the sabotage forcing Faulkner toward bankruptcy, Liv has come undercover to befriend Wainwright and entrap him. But Liv never dreamed she would become torn between saving the company that she and Mickey built and her feelings for the very man whose sabotage is ruining them. On a rain-swept night, Spirit Creek is stunned when one of their own is murdered. The evidence does more than point to Tom Wainwright. It shatters Liv's world. So that's the blurb. And
Barbara?
so as I said,
I just wanted to let you know I'm getting a little bit of static when you're speaking. I don't know if anybody else can hear that as well. I don't know if it's just your microphone or what it is. No idea. I guess just continue then.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble too, but then I usually have trouble.
static, I have no idea.
Okay.
That was clear what you just said now, but when you started reading, I got the statics.
Well, I
speak
just
again.
moved my microphone over a little bit. Maybe that helps.
Probably.
Yeah, I
Sounds
can.
like a bandwidth.
Sounds okay now.
So it'll make.
And I'll turn my speakers down a bit, and maybe that'll help. How's that? That any better?
Sounds good.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, so I will start to read. So I think that what I read as far as the blurb sets it up, that Liv, her name is Olivia, but she's calls herself Liv, she has come undercover, even though she's an executive of Falcon Energy, she has come undercover to try to entrap the farmer who is sabotaging their rigs. And this bit that I'm going to read you is very near the beginning of the book, when there was a town hall meeting in the small town of Spirit Creek. The whole town is suffering because rig workers have been laid off, pipe layers and welders and even real estate people are all suffering because of the fear that Tom Wainwright has brought to the town. Everyone kind of knows it's him, but as the blurb said, there hasn't been enough evidence for the RCMP, who are the cops out in Alberta, to arrest him, to get him. So this town hall meeting, at this town hall meeting, everyone is furious at the cops and at the mayor and demanding that something be done. And then suddenly, Wainwright appears at that town hall meeting. So that's what I'm going to read here. The door banged open. "He's coming," someone yelled. "Wainwright!" The announcement set the hall abuzz. People turned in their seats, watching, whispering, waiting. Liv turned too. A chill speared up her back. A man appeared in the doorway and stopped, the purple dusk behind him. The hall went stone quiet. He stepped into the light and strode down the aisle. He was tall, early 30s, powerful looking, with a long stride and a sun-weathered face. He wore paint-spattered jeans, a brown shirt thick like canvas, and a beat-up black Stetson with a colorful beaded hatband. A feather was jammed into the hat. A feather was jammed into the band at a slant. His gaze was focused dead ahead on the speakers. Someone near Liv whispered, "Sweet Jesus, has he got a gun?" Fear tore into her. He was going straight for Mickey. Wainwright had no visible weapon, but as he stopped a pace short of Mickey, his hand whipped to his back pocket. Liv almost jumped. "He's pulling a knife." Belanger shot to his feet. But what Wainwright pulled out was an envelope. A letter? Liv was close enough to see the Falcon Energy logo. Wainwright's eyes and Mickey's locked, and Liv could almost feel the heat of their mutual hate. "Keep your blood money," Wainwright said, holding up the envelope in front of Mickey's nose. His voice turned low and fierce. A growl meant just for Mickey. "Shove it up your ass." He ripped the envelope in two and threw the pieces in Mickey's face. So that scene ended in a brawl. I'm going to jump a few chapters ahead. Liv has, again, under the guise of being a paralegal working with a local attorney, has befriended Wainwright at this point, has been out to his farm and met his little girl, and even heard from him why it is that not that he's admitting the sabotage, he doesn't do that at all, but he does tell her how he lost his wife and how he believes that sour gas an accidental venting of sour gas, which is highly poisonous, killed his wife. So she and the reader also understands why Wainwright is doing this sabotage, but he's still too clever to be caught, and he's never admitted it. So I'm jumping ahead a few chapters where that has all happened. She has been out of his farm trying to entrap him. He's too careful and he does not fall for anything, and they've become kind of friends. He, of course, not knowing who she really is. So in this scene, Liv is at the motel room that she is staying in while she is undercover in Spirit Creek. She has brought her sister with her to Spirit Creek. They both live in Texas. Her sister is schizophrenic. Her name is Chris. And Liv loves Chris, but she's a real handful to deal with. But she's brought her along because the company is in such trouble that Liv can no longer afford to keep her at the expense of a facility called the Willows, where Chris was staying. So she's brought her sister along. And so this scene is in the motel room late at night. Liv is lying in bed, wondering what the hell she's doing here, because it hasn't worked as far as entrapping Wainwright. And so she's basically staring at the moon and thinking of all this. She rubbed her eyes, itchy from no sleep. The night was so warm, she had on just a sleeveless tank top and didn't need a blanket, just a sheet. Curtains stirring the breeze, bringing an oily whiff of diesel from the Bi-Lo gas station next door. A truck rumbled and then stopped. Liv folded her arms under her head, her gaze drawn again to the moon. High in the window, it hung above the town as clean and bright as if it had taken a dip in the river and was drying off in the summery night air. Instant summer, that's what had come to Spirit Creek. What a changeable place this was, she thought. Was she getting anywhere? Yesterday, visiting Wainwright for that bogus interview, he hadn't let one incriminating word slip. And this deception with Abel and Noreen Loeb made her feel dirty. She was blundering around like some pathetic amateur spy, conning this nice couple, she thought miserably, and for what? How could she get Wainwright to open up about the sabotage, tell her his methods, his materials, details that could lead her to evidence that would put him away? He was so careful and smart and unnervingly together. She thought of what he'd said about refusing to sell his land to Mickey. It would have told me something I don't want to know, my price. That hadn't been play acting. He'd said it with real conviction. He was dug in on that land of his. The land was his life. But didn't everyone at some point have a price? Do I, she thought? What would it take to make me sell out and walk away? She couldn't even imagine. Walk out on Mickey? Nothing in the world would make her do that. The door crashed open. Liv bolted upright with a gasp and snatched the sheet to her chest. Flashlights glared. 2 figures stormed in, black shapes, monstrous. One held a crowbar. Liv's heart banged in her chest. Their lights raked the room, her face. Chris! Chris! Liv kicked off the sheet, scrambled to the next bed, and threw herself on top of her sister, shielding her. Chris woke with a gasp, squirming beneath her. Liv's back was rigid as she waited in terror for blows or a bullet. The man with the crowbar ripped the blanket out from between them. Chris screamed. Liv struggled to sit up, grappling Chris to her, holding her tight. The man raised the crowbar and smashed the lamp between the beds. A ceramic shard razored Liv's forearm. Chris screamed again. They sat huddled together, legs drawn up. Liv wildly tried to think how to fight back, how to get Chris out. The other man was yanking out drawers and hurling clothes. Liv heard liquid sloshing. She smelled gasoline. The first man turned to the desk, raised his crowbar, and smashed it down on her laptop, sending plastic bits flying. He turned his flashlight on her. The light slowly raked her body. Liv pressed her legs tight together, dying inside as his light probed her. He came closer, lowered his black face to hers, a black ski mask. She smelled mildewed wool and beery breath. Her fingers were claws, ready to strike if he touched her or Chris. Get out of town, cunt, or next time we bring matches. Then suddenly, the men were gone. The room was dark. The door opened, creaked on one hinge, and then red taillights raced through the by-low lot and tires squealed. The red lights disappeared and there was silence. In the faint moonlight, Liv could see the shambles of the room. Every drawer had been emptied, the closet too. Every piece of clothing that she and Chris had lay scattered and soaked with gas. The smell was nauseating. She jumped out of bed. A shard of the lamp cut her heel and she winced in pain. She stumbled to the door, and then in the darkness she fumbled to find the light switch on the wall. A hand slammed her arm against the wall. Liv gasped. A man's bulk filled the dark doorway. She struggled in panic to break his grip on her wrist and freed her arm. But as her hand passed the light switch, he snatched her by the waist and yanked her back with such a jerk it knocked the breath out of her. He held her hard against him, his back to her back to his front. Don't, he said. Gas fumes. One spark, this room goes up like a bomb. He let her go and she spun around. Wainwright! His eyes dropped to the thin tank top. It barely stretched to the top of her thighs. A blush fired her cheeks as she tugged her fabric down. She looked desperately at her clothes strewn across the floor, all soaked. He pulled off his denim jacket and slung it around her shoulders. It was far too big for her, and she gratefully jammed her arms into the sleeves and pulled the front closed. Mercifully, it went halfway down her thighs. Chris was whimpering. Liv ran to her and took her in her arms and rocked her. It's okay, Chris, it's over. Nobody's going to hurt you. Wainwright told her they had to get out. Liv helped Chris to her feet. Chris was shivering in shock. Liv whirled a blanket around her sister's shoulders and guided her to the door. Ushering Chris out, Wainwright told Liv to get her car keys. She grabbed her purse, tucked under the desk, and found it was dry, thank God. Slinging the strap over her shoulder, she hurried outside. 2 rooms down, a door opened and a shirtless man in pajama bottoms stopped out, blinking. What the? Call the fire department, Wainwright told him, and don't go into that room. Wainwright looked at Liv. Are you all right? Are you hurt? It didn't make sense, she thought wildly. Why was he here? Liv, did they hurt you? She gaped at him. What are you doing here? I got a call from, he didn't finish. Frowning, he nodded across the parking lot. Liv whirled around. Chris was wandering across the lot in a daze, sobbing, the blanket abandoned on the asphalt behind her. She was going toward the highway. Chris, no! Liv ran after her. Chris stopped, looking lost. Liv reached her, and Chris stood unsteadily, weaving back and forth. She was mumbling numbers. Liv held her, afraid Chris was going to fall. Wainwright was suddenly there, and without a word, he scooped Chris up. In his arms, in her pajamas, she looked like a child. Open your car door, he told Liv. You can't stay here. He started carrying Chris to the car. Liv hurried ahead, opened the passenger door. Wainwright settled Chris in the seat. You sure you can drive? He asked Liv. Of course. Your foot's bleeding. It's nothing. Hold on. He went to his truck, slewed sideways in his haste to park, and came back with a pair of rubber boots. He watched as Liz sat down in the driver's seat and pulled them on. Again, she was swimming in them, but at least it was better than bare feet. I'll follow, he said, in case those goons are still out there. Where are we going? Where you'll be safe. To the Lobes. Noreen Loeb bustled across the bedroom in her dressing gown, bringing another pillow for Chris. Liv, in a pink terry cloth robe that Noreen had fetched from the closet, had finally gotten Chris into bed. Chris had clung to her when they'd first entered the Loeb's daughter's room, but when she saw the collection of stuffed animals on the bookcase, she relaxed a bit. It had been fitted up as a guest room with twin beds, but was still a little girl's place, all yellow and white ruffles. I feel like this is my fault, Noreen said to Liv, fluffing the pillow for Chris. It's because you're helping our group and taking Tom's part. I'm so sorry. We're fine, Noreen, Liv said. Just a bad scare. Really, we're fine. Chris was fidgeting with a thin cotton quilt, a dainty homemade creation of yellow and pink squares. Downstairs, Liv could hear the men's voices, Abel and Wainwright talking, waiting for the police. "Now you make yourselves right at home," Noreen said to Liv, patting the other twin bed. "You know you can stay just as long as you like." "Oh no, that's too much trouble. I'll get another room tomorrow at the motel." "Don't be silly, that's an awful place. And we have loads of room. Alicia won't be back until the end of the semester. I won't take no for an answer." Liv didn't want to argue. She wanted to get Chris settled before she'd have to face the police and give her statement. Noreen picked up Wainwright's jacket that Liv had arrived in, folded it with a sharp vigor, an outlet for her anger, and then tucked it under her arm. "Stan Somerville and his hooligans have a lot to answer for." Saying she'd get a bandage for Liv's heel, she bustled out. Liv sat in the moonlight, holding Chris's hand, feeling so unbalanced and upset that she could hardly get her mind around what had happened. Attacked by the very people whose livelihood she was here to save. And her enemy had come to her rescue. She could still see him lifting Chris, taking charge, arranging this sanctuary. "What am I going to wear tomorrow?" Chris whimpered. "Noreen says her daughter has some things that'll fit you." "New?" she asked in alarm. No, these things are old, way old. You'll like them." "Livy, what if those guys come back?" "They won't, not here. That's not how bullies operate. I won't let them hurt you, Chris. I promise." Downstairs, Liv found Wainwright and Abel standing in the living room. Wainwright had put his denim jacket back on, and Abel was in a gray plaid dressing gown and slippers. Liv tugged the belt of her robe tight and joined them, feeling awkward but grateful. When she thanked Abel for taking her and Chris into his home, he smiled and said, "Oh, you're one of us." Wainwright asked her to describe her attackers. "It had been so dark," she said, and it all happened so fast, but she gave what details she could. The two men looked at each other. "The big one sounds like Harv Prescott," Wainwright said. Abel nodded. "Likely Skeeter rammed with him." "They're buddies." He turned to Liv. "Harv's a rig welder, out of work. They're both from Stan's bunch." She said to Wainwright, "Was it one of them who called you?" That hardly made sense, and yet who else would have known? He looked away. "Nope." He started for the door. "The police will be here soon," Abel explained, "so best if Tom is long gone." "Tom, who did call you?" Liv pressed. "Why would they tip you off?" He had opened the door, but stood frowning as though wrestling over whether to answer her. Abel finally told her. "It was Stan himself. Not exactly a tip-off. He was just using you to get to Tom. It's all to hound Tom." "I don't understand. How?" Wainwright looked at her. "You should know what you're up against. What Stan said was..." He hesitated, clenched his teeth, and then came over to her and lowered his voice. He said, "Your new girlfriend's leaving town in a box." She couldn't hold back a gasp. "You might want to consider going home," Wainwright said, "back to the city." She swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere." "You're taking a big risk being around me." "Life is a risk," she said, "if you're doing it right." Was it a smile in his eyes or wariness? He was so hard to read. The next moment he was gone. She realized she hadn't even thanked him. So that's the end of that. And I'm trying to get my picture back here, which has gone away of you guys. Oh, here, there. Good. So that's the reading. Yeah, so any questions about the story? Or the story, by the way, is based on true events that did happen in Alberta. The story of sabotage against operators of sour gas, natural gas pipelines, wells and pipelines. Sour gas is, I'm trying to remember it correctly, sulfur dioxide. I hope I've got that correct. It's been a while since I've written it. highly toxic, highly poisonous, has to be scrubbed out of all of the natural gas before it's put into the pipelines, which it is, except in the case of this story and in the case of the true story that happened in Alberta, there was an accidental venting of it, and it did certainly cause illness and in my book, the death of Wainwright's wife. So that's the background. Some of you may remember that story. The guy's name was Weibo Ludwig in Alberta, small town called Beaver Lodge in northern Alberta in the Peace River country. And Weibo Ludwig ran a kind of a religious community, a large extended family, his wife and children, his adult children. And he had noticed that there had been a lot of miscarriages among his cattle and his sheep, and then finally among his daughters-in-law. And he decided to take matters into his own hands and started doing the sabotage. So that was the true story. He was a weird and wacky character. I could not make him into an attractive person that to tell the story that I wanted to tell, which was that Wainwright is, of course, in my view, right to have done what he did, the sabotage. So I created a completely new character who was the saboteur. But it is based on the events that happened with Weibo Ludwig, who did go to prison actually for that sabotage. And a murder did happen out there. What happened was that the whole town was so against Ludwig for causing such upset to the community's livelihood with all of the oil and gas, that one night a bunch of teenagers came out screaming in their trucks onto his property to sort of terrify him and his family. Someone in the house shot at them, and one of those teenage girls was killed. It was never proven who had fired the shot. There was a trial. Ludwig was acquitted, but there was a death from that in that tragic story. So all of those events that truly happened in Alberta were what inspired me to create this story, all of which is made up. Yeah, so please unmute yourselves so I can stop talking and you can start talking. I keep losing the picture here. There.
I unfortunately have to run. Thank you, Barbara, very much. Pleasure hearing you. And yeah, I have.
Bye, Dave. There we go. Unmuted. Does anyone have any questions for Barbara?
Well, I remember part of what happened out in Alberta at that time. And, I just wondered, most of your stories, do you go back to real life situations? Is that your inspiration for them, or was this just one of the times this happened?
Yeah, of the 12 books I've had published, 7 were historical novels set in 16th century England. So a lot of obviously research about that period. All of the historical, I'm scrupulous about everything that, about using the historical record accurately and then putting my fictional characters into it as if they could have lived in the historical record. So I'm scrupulous about that, but that's all 16th century England. Of the 3 thrillers that I wrote before Man from Spirit Creek, they're just pretty much fantasy. Beyond Recall was my husband's concept of what if there were a gene that could be passed on to from mother to children, so, of all the knowledge that a mother had, so that we wouldn't have to learn things as children. You would just know things that your mother knew. So that was a fantasy story, that thriller, set in New York City in the 1970s, in which I featured a whole colony of gypsies, of Roma people in New York City, which was lots of fun to do the research about that. I fell in love with the Roma. They're so wild and wonderful. The next thriller that I wrote, and those thrillers I wrote under a pen name, Stephen Kyle. The next one was set in Alaska. It was, and again, it was my husband who brought to my attention the fact that, sorry, I got hair in my face. The fact that the American military had this enormous array of, well, anyway, I won't go into that. But in any case, it was based on a huge scientific project happening in Alaska by the U.S. military. So that was based on fact again, and I did quite a bit of research about that. And then, oh, I was confusing my two stories. Isn't that terrible? Beyond Recall wasn't the one about the gene. That was The Experiment. Yeah, so my thrillers are all based very much in reality, but then I sort of step off and make rather fantastical stories about them. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. What made you choose a different pen name?
Well, Linda, that was years ago. When I wrote those 3 thrillers under the pen name of Stephen Kyle, that was 2000, 2002, 2003. I was under contract with Warner Books in New York. Now they were bought out by Hachette. So but in those days, that was a long time ago, 20 years ago. In those days, writing thrillers as a female was not necessarily the route to success. There was still in those days a sort of a concept, I think probably unconscious in male readership. If it's written by a girl, how exciting can it be? So I chose a pen name just to get beyond that. Female readers in those days didn't really care that much whether a writer was male or female, but male readers tended to.
And that's probably the bulk of that audience, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now that's 20 years ago, and I believe that in 20 years things have changed hugely. I would say almost totally. First of all, yeah. Well, for not just the general populace, but just in publishing, some of the most, I would say most. Well, I'm kind of blathering right now, but a large percentage of the top-selling thriller writers are female now. And readers don't care if it's male or female anymore. So to answer your question, it was in response to things 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barbara.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, Barbara.
I wish I could see you.
Did you go to Alberta?
I did. I did go to Alberta. I spent several weeks out there. First of all, I set things up. A lot of the research that I did, there was one brilliant book by a brilliant Canadian journalist called Andrew Nikiforuk. Probably a lot of you know him. He wrote the book called Saboteur about Wiebo Ludwig. So I had basically highlighted probably every second line in that book. And when I decided to go to Alberta, because I really I needed to be there, I got in touch with him to tell him how inspirational his book was. And so he did set me up with just a couple of people, the RCMP commander in that small town who gave me an interview. And so that was great. So I did set some things up. I spent a few weeks there, and it was absolutely invaluable to be in the beautiful Peace River country, to talk to people who had been affected by Wiebo Ludwig. They all had been affected by him. They either hated him or were grudgingly for him. So it was fascinating to talk to people, the ranchers, the farmers, the storekeepers, the hotel people, the restaurant people. It was just great. It was invaluable. And I always tell writers that research is so important, whatever your story is, because you can never, ever come up with things in your imagination that are as good as the real thing. So I had dinner with a farm couple, passing platters around the table of roast beef and peas from their garden and potatoes from their garden, rhubarb pie, and the way that they talked about their land and their cattle and sour gas and Ludwig and all of that. I could never have imagined those things. So yeah, it was really, really important to be out there in Alberta. And also just to see the land, so completely different than what we know in Ontario. You know. You're writing, all of you are writing, hopefully for a readership that is far larger than just your own community. So I wanted to a person in New Zealand or a person in Zimbabwe, if they had been reading The Man from Spirit Creek, I wanted them to feel what it's like to be in Alberta, to feel that chilly wind in the spring that comes off the Rockies all the way to the northern Alberta. And I wanted them to see the birds that are there. And I wanted them to see the grasses. Tom Wayman is a specialist in growing, in raising sheep for the organic lamb market. I'm now a vegetarian, so it's weird to talk about. But my character, I created a character who's a specialist in grasses because he feeds his sheep only on wild grasses. So I talked to, actually it was a neighbor of ours, and Karen will know this about the area where Stephen and I used to live, who was a specialist in grasses, wild grasses. So I wanted a person in, as I say, Zimbabwe or in Romania to know what it's like for a person to live amongst those grasses, that sort of thing. So I always recommend to all writers, and I'm sure you're all doing it anyway, but take your time with the research, because nothing feeds your work like the research.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question. It's Bruce. In terms of your stories, your novels that are based in Canada, are there any others in this one?
No, just this.
Just this one. Oh, okay. So you may not have an answer for me then on this. I'm just wondering how they're received south of the border and in Europe, because I've just a general understanding is if you're gonna write to the American audience, you should be writing about something that involves the States. I've heard that some countries in Europe are more open to Canadian authors and Canadian writing. So I'm just wondering what your experience is on Canadian location for a novel.
Yeah. There is a certain amount of chauvinism, I guess, amongst Americans, which is, of course, the huge market. They would prefer to read stories set in America, but if you write a great story set anywhere else, they will be open to it too. My advice always is write whatever your story has to be. I'm now starting to write a new book. It's a murder mystery, and I'm setting it basically in the city that I live in, which is Guelph, Ontario. I'm not calling it Guelph. I'm going to create a town, a small city, but it will be Guelph. And I mean, look at who is the thriller writer? My mind goes blank. She sets her murder stories in Montreal.
Right, and in the Eastern Townships, just south of Montreal, is that the one with the police officer?
Oh, that, yeah, there's her, that's Louise Penny.
Right.
But also there is Kathy Reichs, that's the name.
Okay.
Kathy Reichs, who has a pathologist who I think lives in perhaps Maine, but she goes to Montreal also to work. So a lot of the stories are set in Montreal. I think there's lots of examples of people who have done very, very well in the American market with Canadian stories. So I really wouldn't worry about it. If your story has to be Canadian, it has to be Canadian. That's all there is to it. Don't try to force it into Montana, or into California if it cannot be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As I found when I was doing a historical romance. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. It was set back in the era of the War of 1812. Mm-hmm. And I've had people like within the publishing industry say, well, it would really be a better seller if you set it in the Americas, like in America. And I thought that changes the whole perspective of the story. So no, it had to be told from the Canadian/British point of view for the story to make any sense.
For sure, yeah.
And we need to have some of our own stories told once in a while. From a Canadian perspective, I think.
Well, most literary writers in Canada almost all literary novels in Canada are set in Canada. What we're talking about here is popular fiction, commercial fiction, which is what I write. Right. in people who are writing literary fiction, it's very different. You know, it's such a small market. It seems big because literary novelists get all the ink, they get all of the reviews, they get all of their respect. But as far as sales, commercial fiction, popular fiction, just far outsells literary fiction, except of course for some superstars like Margaret Atwood, that sort of thing. But literary writers in Canada are almost all set in Canada. So, you know, depends what you're writing.
Barbara, I'm hearing a different take on the publishing industry today or currently because of COVID and how dire the situation is. Have you seen that, or what have you heard about the publishing industry especially with regards to Chapters and Amazon and the independent publishers as well? Like I think everybody has been hit hard, and I was just wondering how if you can add to any of that.
I'm not sure that I really can, Rosanna. I think we're still so freshly into it, and it has been only 4 months. I think everyone is scrambling. I know that in the publishing industry, just talking to people at my agent is Al Zuckerman at Writers House in New York, and talking to his assistant there and dealing with Al. They're at work. They're all at work. Everybody in the publishing industry is at work, but they're at home. It hasn't changed their life very much. People are just like everybody is on Zoom. They're doing Zoom meetings now instead of having lunches and talking to editors and whatnot. So everybody's at work still. I don't have any insight, but I do have a feeling that that independent publishing and that all of the digital publishing that we can all do, through Amazon and whatnot and iTunes and whatnot. When I follow the trends, in Publishers Marketplace and that sort of thing, sales are good. Sales are still good. Everybody's nervous that the sales are not going to stay good, but so far they are. And of course, the other thing that's really had a big bump is, of course, audiobooks. Audiobooks were already on a real roll for the last couple of years, and now even more so with COVID. So, the whole publishing industry tries to adapt to everything, and this is just something else. But as I say, everyone's at work. And so far, sales are still good, but I have no other insights than that, really. Audiobooks are huge right now. I mean, we're even seeing the superstars. Their publishers are even hiring top actors, star actors now to read audiobooks. So it's people are embracing audiobooks, and they're really selling well. So that's something to keep in mind for anybody who's independent publishing, Have you done your book as an audiobook, Rosanna?
No, I haven't explored that yet, Barbara. I guess I should be doing that because I've heard about, is it Audible that?
Audible, yeah. And if you go to, in Canada, acx.ca is ACX in the States too, is the independent arm, is the arm for independent publishing to record your own audiobook. They make it extremely easy. When I've recorded all of my historicals, but I was hired to do that both as author and also because I'm a former actor. But for my book Page Turner, I narrated that myself. That I independently published, and I narrated that myself through ACX. And I highly recommend it to anyone who's independently publishing. They make it really simple. The royalties are terrific. So check it out, ACX, which is it's Audible's arm for independent publishing of audiobooks. So people, listeners buy it through Amazon. If you go to my page for Page Turner on Amazon, it will show the ebook, it will show the paperback, and it will show also the audiobook through Audible, which was done through ACX. So check it out.
Excellent. I've never heard of that before. Thank you.
Yeah, check out their
Yeah.
website. They make it really easy. I mean, you do have to hire a studio, but my God, studios are everywhere these days. You can even do it in your own closet.
When we're not online and we're back in real life again, hopefully, our meetings are actually at the Unity Cafe and Studio. So we've got a studio on the other side of the wall.
Terrific. Great.
True.
It's very little that's required. I mean, they're very careful, which is great at Audible. When you send in those recordings, they're very careful at going through them. They have quality inspection, which is terrific. It was hilarious because they would send back to me notes saying that such and such wasn't correct. And I had changed it as the author because I thought it read better. So they would be sending me notes and they just wanted to make sure. And as soon as I said, as the author, I would prefer to do it the way I have recorded it, they said, fine. But I liked that their quality inspection, their quality checks were so meticulous. So it's not as though it's anything fly by night, it's not. But you certainly can do it in a closet or in a studio. All the equipment is so available these days for the highest quality audio production, you know, so go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, Marilyn, you got a really good voice for that. You could just record your own.
If I could talk that long.
It's
true. It's quite a skill to do the reading because I
Not
did
that funny.
Sorry, am I frozen here then? Yeah, because I have an acting background, I kind of knew what was necessary. But anyway, it's a skill that can be picked up. It's just that there's a certain rigor to doing it, but I believe anybody can do it. And I recommend it for authors. Yeah.
Getting the drama, the inflection, maybe the sense of humor into the words. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was doing it for all the historicals, my God, because I had French people in it and Spanish people in it and Cockney and whatnot. So I remember when I was trying to get the accent right for my Spanish guy, who's a big character, Carlos Valverde. He's a mercenary soldier. I think that's redundancy, isn't it? Mercenary soldier. Anyway, he's a mercenary. I would listen to interviews with Antonio Banderas so that I could try to get that accent. and with Vergara, who's the gorgeous, voluptuous actress, Vergara, Sofia Vergara. I listened to her also, just to get that beautiful Spanish intonation in English.
I did that when I was trying to read from the self-published book I have. I have like a South African character in it. So I was watching, I can't remember the name of the movies, but there's this one guy that in my mind, that's who he sounded like.
Yeah.
So I kept watching these movies.
So that's rewatching. It's in South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, just a tiny tip. I recommend to writers, don't say self-publishing anymore, say independent publishing. It's what you're doing. You're an independent publisher. Think in terms of film. You know, there's the great big studios, but look at all the films that are independently produced. And that's what you're doing as an author. So, yeah. Independent publishing, I think, is a far better term.
That's a good tip. I'm with you.
Good. I'm going to have to go, guys. Any other questions before I do go?
No, but we're going to start open mic then.
Sorry, this is sort of frozen on me again. Okay. Yeah, so if anybody, unless there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer if there are, but otherwise I will leave you now.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks so much, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
That was great.
My pleasure. Good luck to you all, and stay in touch. Stay in touch through my website, email, whatnot. Okay?
For sure.
Great.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so
So
do we want to take a break or?
how's everybody feeling? My thing's freezing up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine goes well, not, but I think I vote, I'm okay either way, but I vote we keep going unless somebody really needs to stop. I may have to run out and get my power cord again. I just want to lose the momentum and lose people by if we take a break. But that's
Yeah.
just my view. I'm open either way.
Okay. Who here wants to share in the open mic?
So
So
Frank,
Frank
put his hand up.
does.
I've got something.
Frank and Bruce, you ladies, Carrie or Rosanna?
I could. I didn't realize there was going to be an open mic, but I certainly could.
Okay. What about you, Carrie?
How about next time?
That's fine. It's no pressure. I always hate it when we have the live event and then you've gone through the list and someone's, what about me? Because we forgot to hand them the list, you know. Marilyn, did you want to take part of open mic?
Not tonight, Linda.
Okay, that's fine. So who wants to go first?
I'll just say to Carrie, if you change your mind, feel free to jump in at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Hello, my name's Carrie, by the way. Hello, nice to
Hi,
meet
Carrie.
you.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself and Bruce, have at her.
Sure, I'll go first. Okay. This is an excerpt from a novella called Double Cross, which I'm just wrapping up, hoping to independently publish it later this year. It's about 3 teenagers. The story's at an awkward age because it's targeted somewhere between middle grade and young adult. I'm not really sure where it's going to fit. It's about 3 children. It's an adventure story, a mystery. Matt is the protagonist. His sister, Ashley, is a twin, and she's a bit of a fashion plate. And their best friend, Sylvie, has invited them to her aunt's cabin up in Riding Mountain National Park in Manitoba for a midterm break for some snowmobiling and skiing. And of course, they end up getting into all types of situations up there. This takes place at the bus depot in Winnipeg while they're waiting to catch their bus. So it's starts about partway into chapter 2. A moment later, Ashley's back and shoulders jerked to attention as if Prince Harry had walked into the room. Oh my God, the woman who just came in. She's wearing a Chloe coat. A what? Sylvie helped me out. It's stupidly expensive, not what you'd expect at a bus depot. I immediately lost interest and redirected their attention to the left. I think I found that someone special for Ash. A biker well over 100 kilos with a full sleeve of tats on his right arm was leaning against a pillar, picking at his fingernails. His belly stuck out from under a fleece-lined leather vest, rolled over a large belt buckle and stretched the fabric of his black t-shirt. One side of his vest had a Harley-Davidson crest and the other an Indian motorcycle insignia. His dark eyes leered out from beneath a black cap, cheeks and chin hid behind an untrimmed beard. Sylvie sneered. He looks more like something from Duck Dynasty. She stood and pointed towards the rear doors. The driver's going to the bus. Let's be the first in line so we get good seats. We shivered outside for 10 minutes before the driver opened the doors for boarding. The girls grabbed the first row with a panoramic view out the front. I took the aisle seat immediately behind them, hoping to keep the window seat to myself as well. We agreed to switch places in an hour. The rest of the passengers streamed on. The last to climb up the steps and poke his bushy head into the warm air was the biker. He stood there for a moment, scanning the full bus, then clomped down the aisle. I relaxed until a giant paw landed on the top of my seat. I tensed. The biker glared down at me. His other paw rested on Sylvie's seat, erasing any thoughts of escape I might have had. The bus is full, he sniffed. So, bro, if that seat beside you isn't taken, looks like you and me are going to be traveling buddies, buddy. I got up and let him squeeze in. Leaning forward in the aisle, I whispered to the girls, so which of you want to enjoy his company when we switch seats? They pointed at each other and said, she will. The bus started out of the station. The biker cleared his throat, swallowed, and grunted. So you a student? Yeah. High school? Yeah. Ever been in trouble? A little. Do yourself a favor. Stay in school. Stay clean. Trouble ain't worth it. I got mixed up with some bad dudes and ended up in prison. Ever been in prison? I looked at him like he was on drugs. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. As a visitor, I mean. No, neither way. I wanted my lack of prison experience to be perfectly clear. He got a little glassy-eyed, like he was recalling a vacation in Hawaii. I was in Stony Mountain Pen. What did you do? I immediately wished I hadn't asked. This conversation was getting way too friendly. Nothing much. Me and my buddies robbed some gas stations. He looked out the window. I'm not into that stuff now. I took some courses in the slammer, got my high school diploma, and found my calling. I felt my eyes involuntarily widen. You got religion? Nah, nothing like that. Since I had this natural knack of palming things, I decided to put the skill to good use. I learned magic. You're a magician? Even I heard the obvious doubt in my voice. He became surly. That's what I said. You got a problem with your ears? He thrust a large hand at my head. I froze. He tugged my earlobe, pulled out a loonie, and then growled. There's more where that came from. Another half a dozen coins followed the first. I stiffened with the realization that this dude could break my neck in a second. Why was I still sitting there? Why? Because jumping up and screaming didn't seem like an option either. His thick fingers came from my face. Every muscle in my body spasmed. My hands clamped onto the armrests. He yanked a $5 bill out of my mouth, wedged it under my right palm, and said, Here, I think this is yours. You must have misplaced it. He slammed back in his seat, laughing. Didn't mean to scare you. It's part of the act. I released my breath. You really are a magician. You didn't believe me? That's part of the problem with this world. Too many stereotypes. You should see the look on the faces of suburban housewives. They open the door to welcome the magician for little Charlie's or Stephanie's birthday party, and they see me standing there. He chuckled. One of my best tricks is turning new mothers into stone. Where you headed? It took a second to catch this change of topic. Riding Mountain to visit my friend's aunt. Me too. Riding Mountain, that is, not your friend's aunt. He laughed again. But who knows? Maybe I'd like to visit her. That's the end of the excerpt. You'll have to come back in September and maybe I'll finish that chapter.
Okay, everybody is still muted.
I heard most of it. You guys keep freezing on me, damn it.
Must just be a
Who
bad
wants-
night for Zoom.
Okay, you can applaud now.
Who wants to go next? Frank, is that you saying
Well,
you're ready?
I was just clapping. I'm on brain delay. Not.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
So you want to go? You want to go, Frank?
Oh, I don't care. I'll go whenever.
Okay, go ahead. Get her
Okay.
done.
You can obviously hear me.
I can, yeah.
You can. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear the piano
Yes, nice.
as well as I? Is it sort of balanced?
Yeah, I think so. For me, how's everyone else?
Okay, but you can hear both of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to. Oh. I'll do a little wee bit from a novel series that I'm writing. It's 9 books long. 2 are finished. They run about 150,000 words each, finished in draft. And what I'm going to do is read the intro bits that are some quotes of some of the characters primarily from the novel. And then I'll do a song and I'm out. The Raven's Claw, Book 1, Children of the Earth. The raven calls to me from the darkness. I listen and I hear, and I am hopeful and powerful, and the raven's wings touch my soul. I have heard them whisper. Sandra is one of the key characters. One spirit is a lonely, solitary thing, void of form or shape. Yet it is the one thing a woman or a man will reach for when she or he has lost all else. Eugene Dawes, The Derelicts, the poetry of Eugene Dawes. That's the main character. And actually, I've written already a book of poetry that he writes that is one of the books in the series. So it's kind of cool. That's different than the two drafts that are done or separate from. The children of the earth shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew chapter 8, verse 12, the Bible. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven, which went to and fro until the waters of the earth were dried up. And that's, of course, from the Bible. We have descended from the wombs of our foremothers and the sperm of our forefathers. And it is conceivable that by these acts of mere descension, we may be somewhat less than they. Eugene Dawes, The Derelicts, the poetry of Eugene Dawes. And with reverence I say, no woman and no man is better than the worst, and accordingly, no woman and no man is worse than the best. They all struggle, and in their struggling, they are neither good nor bad. They are just women and men, and that is all. Else, they would have been made different. Eugene Dawes, The Derelicts, the poetry of Eugene Dawes. Now, walking in your own light. I'll walk on by, no, don't. I'll walk on by. You are walking to your destiny. Hearts are hidden in, yeah, concrete. Walk on by, no, don't. Walk on by. People walking to their destiny. Hearts are hidden in concrete. Hearts are hidden in concrete. Don't walk on by. No, don't walk on by. Especially if it's your own heart. Walk in your light. Oh, walk in your light. Own that light that's yours. It is your holy, holy right. Walk in your own light. Walk in your own light. It is your holy, holy, holy right. There. Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice, Frank.
Thank you. It came across okay?
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
sound was good.
Yep. Heard it well.
That's
So, do we have anyone else? Rosanna, did you want to do something?
Rosanna, you're muted.
You have to unmute yourself. She's muted again. There you go.
I'm going to go and grab something. I'll be right back. So I'm going to just stop the video for a moment and I'll be back in a few seconds. My phone went off and I want to turn it off.
Okay, no problem. So how's everybody doing in the heat this week?
Yeah.
Unbearable.
There's no
Yeah.
August, right?
No.
Well, there's August, you know, it's on the calendar, but you know what I mean.
There's no event in August, no.
Okay,
No.
thanks, Aaron. Things move slow now.
I thought you were referring to the summer heat. And summer was going to be
okay.
It's hot down where you are too, Carrie?
Yeah, it was unbearable today. It was about 97 degrees with humidity.
Wow.
And it was just, and I work, my daytime job is I'm a landscape designer. So I get to be outside in the heat all day long.
Fun. No fun that.
No.
Probably good most days. These are just extreme.
It is, yeah. No, most of the time, I mean, a little rain, a little wind, that's fine. But this heat is just takes it right out of me. So, but it's good. I'm inside, relaxed.
Where are you?
I live in Massachusetts, right down in the southwestern corner of Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So most of us are in Barrie. Where are you, Rosanna?
I'm in Sudbury.
Ah,
So a couple of 3 hours north of Barrie, 4 hours north of Toronto.
yeah. What's the weather there?
Very hot, really hot. We've had a few hot days.
It's usually a difference of like a couple degrees from Barrie to here. So,
Feels
or
like
Barrie to there.
Well, it's very hot, but not as hot as southern Italy last year when I was there. So,
Oh, wow.
but I'm staying cool. Am I frozen or?
No?
Oh,
Not right now.
okay.
Not for me.
Just turn your air conditioning down.
Actually, I think I need to turn it up.
Okay, well, speaking of Frozen, I rent the movie.
Okay, so are you ready?
Yes. Okay, so I'll just read an excerpt from my historical novel. And I'm glad I found out about this evening because Barbara Kyle I had met her at a conference, a Canadian Authors Association conference. And we sat, I had sent her a chapter or two from my novel in progress, which was this novel, La Brigantessa. And she did a critique on it and invited me to send her the manuscript when I was done. So I did, and she did an evaluation on it, which was really constructive. And I'm so glad I did that because I did some further edits and polishing. And then I had sent her draft number 3 of this novel. And when I was ready to send it off to a publisher, it was draft number 6. So anyway, Barbara was a great help in pointing out a few points, a few things that I needed to look at. Anyway, so it was published in October 2018, and by Inanna Publications of Toronto. And I'm happy to say that I was awarded a gold medal for historical fiction at the Independent Publisher Book Awards in New York City last April. And it's hard to believe that I was actually in New York City for that last year. But anyway, I've read from it in different cities, including at a conference in Italy last year. So I'll just read a little excerpt from it. It's set in Calabria, Italy in 1862, by the way, during a very turbulent period of Italian history, post-unification. So Italy has just been united as Italy, because prior to this time, Italy was ruled by different, like by the Austrians, for example, in the north, by the Spanish Bourbons in the south. So there was a movement to unite Italy. When it was united in 1861, there was a lot of unrest and rebellion because the new government was from the north, and it was creating all kinds of, imposing all kinds of taxes, which made life for the peasants in the south, which was an agricultural region, much harder. And there was a lot of starvation and poverty, and there was rebellion. And the government went after these rebels who turned to a life of hiding and became outlaws, brigands, or briganti as they were known. And so there was a phenomenon of brigandage or outlawry in Italy in the south. And the period from 1861 to 1871 was actually called Il Decennio di Fuoco, which means the decade of fire, because of the violence and the unrest, and the government trying to repress or go after the brigands in a very ruthless way. And so in researching the book, I found that the government sent out the forces of law that were often even more ruthless than the actual brigands themselves. So this is set in a tiny community in southern Italy, and the neighbors are engaged in the annual tradition of the hog slaughter. And one of the main characters is a young peasant woman by the name of Gabriella, and it's getting very hot around the fire because they're cooking, and she goes off to the fountain to get a drink of water. And this is when a young man from the village, who is the butcher's son, approaches her. And I'll just read a little passage from the first chapter. We had it a minute ago. Did you leave me a drop or two? Gabriella splutters at the sudden voice behind her, flushes at Tonino's teasing tone. Gabriella, I want to talk to you. His voice is husky, urgent. She swallows. Yes? She stifles the desire to wipe the beads of sweat from his forehead. Tonino shakes his head. Not now. This is not the right time or place. He searches her face for a moment. Will you meet me down at the river this afternoon, past the place where you do your washing? He clears his throat. By the abandoned vineyard? Gabriella feels her cheeks burn. She looks away. Is Tonino trying to set up a secret tryst? Does he think she will agree to a secret meeting instantly, as if she has no scruples, no thought for her reputation? What reason does he have to think that she will agree? For as sure as her middle name is Lucia, after Santa Lucia, she knows that her father would not approve of such a meeting, even with the son of his best friend. She turns back to him with a frown. He coughs. I just want to talk to you, nothing more. You can talk to me now. She glances at him sideways. There's no time. In a minute, my father will be calling me to chop up the meat for the sausages. I'll be helping with the sausages. I don't want an audience when I talk to you. Gabriella wants to ask why not, but bites back her words at Salvatore's booming call. Signor Antonino, How are you supposed to perfect your father's trade if you're playing with girls? Get your apprentice's ass back here. Amid the laughter, Tonino looks wryly at Gabriella with a, "What did I tell you?" expression. He sets down his cup on the rough stand and begins to walk away. He stops and turns around after a few paces. "I'll be there at mid-afternoon," he says, "by the abandoned vineyard." Gabriella watches as he strides away, noticing how his linen shirt clings to his back in places. She lifts her face to the crisp breeze from the Ionian Sea in the distance and inhales deeply, trying to steady the drumming in her chest. Hoping that her face doesn't betray her, she walks briskly to the others, who are ready to begin the chopping and mixing of the sausage meat. She rinses her hands with the rest of the water from the jug and takes a spot at the long oak table. After Salvatore and Tonino chop up the larger pieces of pork shoulder, her father cuts them up further and slides them over to her. All chatter seems to die down suddenly, as if they are taking in a solemn church service. Gabriella salts, peppers, and sprinkles the ground pork with fennel, stirring to distribute the spices evenly before placing it in a wooden vat where it will remain until the following day. Occasionally, she steals a glance at Tonino, and to her surprise and pleasure, he happens to be gazing at her on every one of those occasions. She flushes with a sudden conviction that she will be meeting Tonino later by the river, forbidden or not. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's my book.
Great.
Thank you. By the way, la brigantessa is the word for female brigand, female outlaw. And many of the brigands or the bandits were accompanied by their wives or lovers, and they were known as brigantesse, one of them being una brigantessa.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to read?
Gary, do you want to put in a plug for your latest?
Yeah. Well, sure. Why don't I read a couple of, I'll read the first maybe couple of pages from my short story that I just published a few days ago, actually.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Where's it published?
So I have this character. This is actually a little short story I wrote after my first novel, Treasure of the Moon Goddess. And a little backstory is that my main character, she is a marine biologist, but she specializes in the Bronze Age transatlantic movements. So I won't get in too much to the first book, but this is a little short story I wrote after the fact of her first big adventure. And she is with her friend George. And so I'll just read you the first couple pages. My eyebrows lifted at the man who currently blocked the ship's narrow hallway. I'm not doing it, George. Please, I'd be indebted to you, George said, smiling his best toothy grin. I shook my head. Sorry, but it's still a no. Although George was a good friend, I wasn't about to join on his quest of lunacy. Come on, Christy, what do you have to lose? Have to lose? He clearly bumped his head on something hard like a ship's bulkhead. Well, let's see. I'll lose any kind of reputation I've gained from finding the Belize tomb, and more importantly, I'll lose whatever's left of my mind. George let out a long sigh and held out his hands in a defensive gesture. Look, I'll be honest. I can't do it without you, he said. He widened his green eyes as if an attempt to look earnest would sway me. I stopped trying to push past him. Why is that? Because it's possible, he paused and bobbed his head back and forth, that it might be underwater now. I made a move to get around his wide frame, wider now that he started working out and training with JE Corp's security team. I feinted left, then dodged right, slipping under his arm. I'm not helping you find the fountain of youth, I told him. If you want to visit the real thing, it's on the northwest side of Bimini. You can even rent a kayak to go see it. You know very well that it's not the real fountain, he said, and added, but I think I know where it is. You thought it was on Bimini, I reminded him. He ignored the statement with a wave of his hand. It will be fun, a nice little relaxing trip. No, George slipped a folded piece of paper from the back of his pocket and unfolded it, carefully smoothing out the creases. It was a map, or more precisely, a copy of a map. Across the paper's length, thick, black, irregular lines swooped down and around at different points where names were written in Latin. I tugged gently on one of my long curls, twisting the strands around my finger, and ignored the slight gut clench as I studied the lines and cursed my curiosity. Where did you say this was? The warm Caribbean breeze lifted the edges of the paper as I studied the lines. That was supposed to be a coastline. George's face lit up at my question. He grabbed a couple of bottles of water and placed them at the corners. Okay, so as long as you know, before I came here, I was on a dig in St. Augustine on the eastern coast of Florida, where Ponce de Leon first landed, hoping he would find the fountain of youth. Did she say yes? Interrupted a loud voice from across the deck. At the prow of the ship, Hans, my boss and owner of Johansson Exploration, grinned. It was all I could see of his face. A large brimmed sun hat he wore shaded most of his weather-lined cheeks. Behind him, off in the distance, the palm tree-laden coast of Bimini Island bobbed in and out of sight. No, she did not say yes. I turned back to the map. The only color on the black and white map was a thick red circle surrounding an island called Marco Island, located off the southern west coast of Florida. George tapped the encircled area. I'm interested in this area here. Marco Island was the last place where Ponce de Leon landed. Numerous records said he fought 2 great battles with the native tribes there. In the last battle, Ponce de Leon was separated from his men and chased into the mangroves. After that, no one saw him. He just disappeared. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. So where was this published?
So I self-published it myself, or indie published.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indie published it myself.
Oh, good. Nice.
So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Where are we going to find your work?
So I published wide. So I know in Canada you have Tolino, is it? And Kobo.
Kobo, yeah.
Yep. So Kobo, Tolino, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Amazon, and then I also opted to get it into libraries. So you should be able to, I forget, it's like Bibliothea, I think it is, and I think I can't remember the other one. But so you should be able to go to the library and request either the ebook. I didn't do, since this is actually just a short story, I decided not to do print, but they're going to do audiobook instead. So that should be out hopefully in the next few weeks through Findaway Voices, which is affiliated with Draft to Digital, which made it pretty easy, actually.
So there's 2 books on Amazon, Treasure of the Moon Goddess and Fountain of Angels.
Yes. Yep.
Fountain of Angels is the short story that Carrie was just reading from.
Yes.
Okay. I will look for those. And I'm going to look for Find Away Voices too.
Yeah, actually, you know, I was going back and forth with the ACX, I think it is, and Find a Way. They already Draft to Digital, who was the ebook provider that I used. Since they're affiliated, I mean, they just downloaded the whole thing for me right to Find a Way. And I got an email saying that they would just put together a list of authors. I mean, you know, they are speakers.
Voice actors?
7 days. What's that?
Voice actors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So hopefully we'll hear back within the next few days. I'm quite excited. This is my first foray into, you know, doing audiobooks. So
That's good. Marilyn has a boatload of books she could get put on audio. So, yeah. I don't have a boatload at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Our next word up is September 10th. We've been kind of taking our time booking authors because we don't know if we're going to be on Zoom still or if we're going to be in person again. It's nice that we can have people from so far away visit us so easily.
Yes, well, I have to say thank you to Bruce for inviting me.
You're welcome. It's good to have you on board.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. I appreciate talking to other book-like minded people.
It is nice. That's one of the nice things about this format. I'm finding the Q&A works a little differently than it would at live, and we get to talk more bookish writing, lifestyle kind of stuff too, which is nice.
Okay.
So
Definitely.
yeah. So we don't have anyone booked for September yet, but we're sort of working on it. I guess we're going to see if we're going to be live and in person or live and online, and we'll hopefully.
Just kind of cut out.
Regardless, though, we're going to be September 10th. So the next one's September 10th. We'd like to thank Rhubarb Media for hosting our website, and you guys are Word Uppers. You guys make this awesome. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
that's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll see you in 2 months.
Yep.
Yeah. Have a
Enjoy
good
the rest of your summer, everybody.
Everyone take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Happy summer.
Huh.
It's not working.
Yeah, I'm slow.
We'll find it.
Yeah.